Okay, welcome to a new episode of the Decanted Portfolio. This is episode number 20 already. How are you, Bastian? You are in a different place today.
Yes, different place. Good morning, everyone. I'm in Europe. I'm in France for a couple of days,
Okay.
so super happy to feel the winter, to feel the real cold that we like in Europe, and so very excited to be on the same time as Nico. So it's we are Friday morning. It's the 13th of March 2026, and welcome to the Decanted Portfolio. And let me start with just the usual and traditional but mandatory disclaimers. So first one is this is not financial advice. You make your own decision according to your personal situation. And second, please be responsible when you drink. So don't drink and drive, and be very careful with alcohol.
Thank you.
So Nico, maybe can you talk about the agenda of the day?
Of course, of course. First, for who doesn't know us, we are the founders of Pantaray, which is a startup active in software and financial markets. The sponsor of this episode is Pantaray Adapt, which is an investment strategy for all phases of the economic cycle, all weathers. And in fact, we'll take a look later. All markets are going down. Stocks, bonds, only oil is doing well. And our strategy, the promise is to defend in this environment, is in fact delivering positive returns. Okay, we'll discuss about this later. I'm connected from sunny Madrid, and the agenda for today will be first, we focus on wines, and later we'll take a look at financial markets, which is our usual format. And as the war in the Middle East continues, we decided to pick and choose regions away from the conflict. And I'll pass it on to you, Bastian. What did you think about for this week?
This week I'm going to talk about South Africa, which is one region of my heart, because I had the chance to live 2 years in Cape Town, so which is right in the middle. You will see it on the map of the wine producing area of South Africa, because everything is more or less in Cape Town region. And I think that is an interesting region to pick up, because it's very diverse, with a specific climate, and also they've been very innovative, and there's some very nice story about it. And maybe before I jump, Nico, you can tell the people what you are going to talk about after me.
See, of course. So we go in South Africa with Bastian, and I went further away from the conflict into New Zealand. You know, I tried to pick and choose a beautiful region that we didn't talk about yet. We look into the map of the two islands, north and south, and we'll focus on a specific region which is called Central Otago for later, okay? So stay with us. Okay, on South
Yeah.
Africa, you tell me when to pull the map out.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you, Nico. Otago, very exciting. I'm super excited that to discover what you're going to say and talk about in the second part of the podcast.
Thank you.
So yeah, just quickly on the map.
Okay.
As you can see, as I mentioned, you can see Cape Town, which is like the far southwest, of South Africa. Very famous, city in the world for many reasons, because it's of course almost the Cape of Africa. Not really. When you look at the map, you can see that this is not completely true, but like in the for everyone this is the case. But it's very beautiful city, because it's the middle of the city. You have mountains, and also there's a specific climate. And the reason why there's a specific climate in Cape Town is the sea, because there's a very cold current named the Benguela current. So Benguela current, which brings very cold water to Cape Town. So that's unfortunate, because if you love to swim, it's difficult to find the water above 10 degrees. So it's quite cold. If you do surfing, usually you need to be protected, and put a specific jersey, because it's too cold for surfing like this, like in the southwest of France. But it has also great impact for wine producing, and I will get back to it later. Just in terms of regions, because we have a map open. So you see, if we look at north of Cape Town, full north of Cape Town, This is where we have a Swartland, which is probably the largest region producing wine in South Africa. Interesting one because you have very new winemakers, many new winemakers who are doing very good wines, small production, small batches. They're doing a lot of testing, a lot of tries, and that's very dynamic regions. You have Stellenbosch, which is a little bit east of Cape Town on the map, a little bit green, probably the most famous regions, where you have big and nice houses of wine producing, such as like the Rothschild. They have like vineyards there. The Rupert family, the owner of Cartier, which is South African with South African, have also some vineyards there. You have Paarl a little bit north of Stellenbosch in yellow, which is also very famous. And you have also Constantia. If you look at the map, just little bit south of Cape Town, you have like a small blue hint in the map. And so it's in the middle of the city, and you have also one of the most famous vineyards there, because you have the Vin de Constance, which is a very sweet wine, very old wines, which was the favorite wine of Napoleon. So the emperor, the French emperor, because when he was arrested, he was sent to Sainte Helene, which is an island a little bit north of Cape Town, in the middle of the Atlantic Sea. And he had a stomach pain, and therefore he could only drink, sweet wine, and he was drinking the sweet wine from Constantia, from Cape Town, during the last year of his life. So that's an interesting story. So just maybe another quick question for you, Nico, and maybe you know or you don't, or maybe you don't know the answer, is why do we have wine in South Africa? Because if you look at the map of the wine producing world wine, it's little bit, a beautiful spot in the middle of no wine producing at all.
I actually have no answer for this. I would imagine that the weather is, of course, promising. And I would imagine that some maybe European immigrants went there and brought something, but I'm inventing. I have no idea.
I mean, you're totally right. It's because of a European, it's because of the French. But the main reason why wine was produced, it was starting to be produced there in South Africa, is trade and business, and this is because of the Dutch. Because the Dutch, they were, of course, very powerful in terms of trading, and they had like a lot of trading points and cities around the world, and they were trading spices in the 17th century. So that was long time ago, between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Europe. And so they had like a very, probably the largest company in the world at that time, which was like the company trading spices. And so they were going from Netherlands to the coast of Africa, Cape Town, and then going east to Asia. So a very long trip, and you can imagine with like, of course, very old boats. It was taking months, but also very dangerous one, because many people were dying during that trip because it was very long, with not good hygiene and conditions, problem with food, problem with water. So they said, okay, what can we do to improve and to be more efficient? And Cape Town was just in the middle of this, of this travel, and they decided to do a hub to repair the boats, to change basically the crews, to make them eat, and to get catering, and to find new supplies. And so that's why they decided to stop in Cape Town. They started to produce, of course, vegetables and everything they can put, on the boat. And they realized that the water, after a couple of months, was no longer good. Still water. You cannot keep it for months on the boat. At the end, it's not proper for human. And they decided to put wine instead of water in the boat, because with the alcohol, it's a little bit the same story than with the port wine that we discussed a couple of episodes ago. They said, let's produce wine in Cape Town, but they couldn't do it. And luckily, what happened, because they didn't know the technique, they had the French Huguenots, who were Protestants, like the Dutch are, who migrated to Netherlands to be protected, because in France they were persecuted because of their religions. And so they said, we have some people who know how to produce wine. So they asked them to move in Cape Town. And this is how the Huguenots arrived in Cape Town to produce wine. And they knew the techniques, and they started to produce wines in the 17th century. So, I mean, you have a lot of, and in Constancia, it was the first location where they started to produce wine. So it's a long history, a long tradition with a lot of, things. And you are very surprised to see that some vineyards have been created in the 17th century.
Oh,
so although most of the vineyards in Europe, for instance, that's super interesting. Mm-hmm. So just to speed up a little bit in terms of grapes, in terms of size, so it's 140,000 hectares. Mm-hmm. So that's the eighth biggest wine producer in the world. Spain, it's close to 1 million. Okay, to give you like a scale, and France is like 700,000. Okay, so it's still, far from the biggest one, but still, decent number. In terms of grapes, they have Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, so traditional ones, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, and Pinotage. So Pinotage is unique. I mean, of course, you can find some Pinotage in some other part of the world, but it's a grapes which has been invented in South Africa. It's completely made on purpose. It was not by luck. It was made by the R&D decades ago. And that's an interesting grape because it's an hybrid. So grapes, it's a combination, a mix between, of course, Pinot Noir for Pinotage and Cinsault. So Cinsault is a grapes which like the heat, and you would see there's heat in this part of the world. And Pinot, of course, we all know Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, is the grape of Burgundy, and is a grape of also you have in New Zealand, but it's much more sensitive, much more beautiful, and like the cold. So they were trying to combine these two because these are really the two main characteristics of climate in South Africa. Because of the cold currents, so the Benguela, which I mentioned before, you have some cold because like of course the temperature coming from the sea is cold, and of course you are south, you are in the southern hemisphere, and basically when the sun shines, of course it's hot very, very, very quickly. So that's why it's an interesting discovery. So maybe just to close on that part. I want to talk about a little secret on my side. It's like southeast of Cape Town. When we look at the map.
I open the map again. Okay, it's back here.
Yes. Please.
Okay, it's open. It's open. You will not be able to see it, but it's here. Yeah.
So we have basically very nice region southeast of Cape Town. When you see you have Strand and you go on the coast, so deeper southeast, and you have two main regions which are Elgin and Walker Bay. Okay, and they are really interesting regions because they are cooler than Cape Town and cooler than Swartland or Stellenbosch or these regions because they are really by the sea and in a place where basically they get all the wind as well, and you can get some very interesting and some very good Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc. And so Sauvignon Blanc is more for Elgin, and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is more for Walker Bay. And so if you see a bottle from South Africa and it's written Walker Bay on it, you should try to buy Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from this region. And my little secret is a small hill named Hemel en Aarde. So sorry for my Dutch, guys. So Hemel en Aarde, I think it's better. Heaven on earth, translated from the Dutch. And you have like a small tiny road that goes above a hill. You have a very beautiful view on the sea. And through that road, you have maybe like 21 producers max. And you have on that road, to be honest, the dream of Pinot Noir for me in South Africa. Because you have Hamilton Russell, wine producer, probably the most famous South African producer for Pinot Noir. Newton Johnson, which is also fantastic. Ataraxia, and the last one I will name is Creation. So these four producers, among the 20 which are on that road, they do a very, very Burgundy style, Pinot Noir because of a cool climate And I really recommend it to you guys. Of course, price, I mean, is much more interesting than Burgundy and even than New Zealand. Much more cheaper, and very good wine, very good quality for money. And even if you have the opportunity to go there and to visit and have a look, you have also a very good restaurant in Newton Johnson for have a beautiful lunch with a fantastic wine pairing. So I strongly recommend these regions and to enjoy it. I will write the name on on YouTube, so to make sure you are not lost with my pronunciation. And I'm sorry to my Dutch or South African friends who speak Afrikaans for my pronunciation. Sorry, guys. Apologies.
No, fantastic. You know that I think I tried a time ago from Elgin. You said Sauvignon Blanc, but I tried a red wine. I'm not sure if it was a Cap Sauvignon, which is unusual, or a local Pinot Noir, and it was monumental. It was an important wine. It was super elegant, I remember. So just to say that, in fact, these are probably emerging, super interesting regions. You lived there in South Africa, must have been beautiful to explore these areas. Constancia is well known in the world of wine, but little known, beautiful denomination of sweet wines with these beautiful bottles. And you very kindly brought me one some time ago, which was a Vintage Constancia, really, really nice. It's a regional to explore.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it's full of history, full of story. And I must say that in terms of user experience, client experience, all these vineyards in South Africa, even the ones, because you have some wines who are doing like average wine, they are not all very good, of course, like everywhere in the world. They have built amazing, places to welcome, clients, and you can spend the day there, have picnic. They have very good restaurants. And of course very interesting wine pairing. So it's if you have time, because it takes time, of course, you can spend a couple of days there, and if you love wine, you will have great experience. And the scene, the landscape is just like it's
Magic.
Really magic. It's beautiful.
Nice, fantastic. Okay. Thank you for the overview of South Africa. I remember that in one of the previous episodes some time ago, we went into Chenin Blanc as a specific grape and a couple of producers. Here we are zooming out. We checked the region extensively. You had a very good map to propose. And in later episodes, we'll go and explore maybe grapes or a few things from the specific areas. And we like to start with these introductions of the regions and then go specifics or vice versa, okay? So thank you, Bastian, for this overview. I will go into New Zealand. So again, the episode today is about markets focused on the conflict in the Middle East, and we want it to be far away. South Africa is a region which is away, and we go into a second one, which is New Zealand. So, Bastian, New Zealand is very famous, like South Africa now, part of, or an important part of, the New World wines. And I'm amazed when I reviewed the history of the region, amazed at thinking that the first planting happened in the 60s, but in reality still in the 70s and 80s, New Zealand was nowhere in the world tournaments of wine or in the early discoveries of new things like it was, for example, for California. And even in 1997, when the North Island, where Auckland is, was starting to become a wine region, down in the South Island, which is closer to the cold, in Central Otago, in 97, that seems yesterday, you only had 14 producers. So the success of New Zealand is very recent in the world of wines, and with a production which is small percentages of total grapes grown on the planet, the branding of New Zealand has become very important. And it is a story that really unfolded in between the years 2000, 2010 and 2020. Okay, it's very recent. If you don't put New Zealand on a map, of course, in general, we are close to Australia, in the south of Australia, and I will bring a map down to you. So, Bastian, I'm covering you now for a minute, and you will see that almost the entirety of New Zealand is now split into different wine regions. And there are many regions and many sub-regions, but I would call your attention on a couple of things. Of course, we have Auckland in the north, Wellington in the south of the North Island, and in the center of the South Island, we are close to Christchurch, where, you know, we depart to go towards Central Otago. And we need to be aware at least of a couple of historical wine regions. Between Northland and Gisborne is where a lot of the wine growing started, but some of these areas are now kind of abandoned. Hawke's Bay in the north is probably the historical region that made New Zealand relevant in the map of at least the red wines. Red grapes in New Zealand, which tend to be Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, and Pinot Noir especially. Cabernet Sauvignon less and less, so probably Merlot is now the grape of focus with Syrah in New Zealand. But then South Marlborough, so the north of the South Island, the star of the Sauvignon Blanc and some of the Chardonnays in New Zealand. Some producers like Cloudy Bay multiple times have been in the top 100 best wines on the planet. And then we go south to the end of the South Island and we land in Central Otago, which will be the region of focus. So a couple of things. New Zealand has a fantastic climate, is close to the sea, summers and hours of sun a day, multiple hours, but the nights, especially in the South Island, tend to be reliably cool all the times. So fantastic weather for grapes. Second, New Zealand has in the reds and in the whites a peculiar characteristics, which is a very sharp, very bright acidity. So the wines are fascinating and beautiful when they are young, and especially the red wines, including the Pinot Noirs, tend to be ready to drink when they are produced, which is very convenient from a commercial point of view and also to enjoy the ripeness of the fruit in the wine. But also they tend to have an herbaceous green base that humbly, I would say, makes the New Zealand wines very recognizable, especially the Sauvignon Blanc. Very sharp, racy, fruity, and herbaceous as well. So the New Zealand wines have a brand which is coming from nature, which makes their wines very distinctive. So why the North Island with the Merlot in Hawke's Bay and the Sauvignon Blanc in Marlborough put New Zealand on the map of big wine producers? The focus today is on the south, a secluded, now less so, region that is really close to the South Pole, if we want, still distant but close, where you have hills and mountains where wine is produced at around 500, 700 meters, so slightly lower hills versus, for example, Mendoza, but closer to California or to Burgundy, and these are lands with very small human developments. So if you want pristine blue skies and in the distance some mountains with snow as well, this is an ideal area for Pinot Noir. And I am choosing Pinot Noir because I think Pinot Noir is probably the noblest red grape on the planet. Started in Burgundy, but old world French Pinot Noir, very different from New World Pinot Noir, and both, despite depending on the same grape, incredibly interesting wines, but different. And New Zealand has a peculiar characteristic. So if we go into Burgundy, light-colored, important complexity, especially on the big cuvée, not thinking of Romanée Conti necessarily, but a lot of good Burgundian Pinot Noirs are complex despite being floral and delicate. Okay, you have this base of violet and then the complexity changes depending on the wine. When you go into New World Pinot Noir, it can be Patagonia in Argentina, New Zealand, South Africa, or New Zealand, the fruit is incredibly richer. Instead of floral, think about a marmalade of red fruit. In fact, the origins of the Central Otago Pinot Noir were not very elegant Pinot Noirs, immediate, right? Ripe fruit as you would see in a Malbec. Slightly lighter bodied, but still intense fruit. While over time and over the years, they improved the quality And now the wines can not only stay in the bottle for a long time, but they tend to be incredibly more fine, but they have more body respect to a French Pinot Noir. So these are more structured red, which can compete with the Merlot and the Cabernet Sauvignon for flavor, can go with meat easily, but in the Central Otago we maintain a finesse despite the fruit, a strong acidity, spices, and to my personal taste, there's a base of creme brulee or caramel coming out that make them very easy to drink without food, as you would do with some lighter Burgundy from France. But they are incredibly interesting and complex with food as well. And I love approachable red wines that don't need food because of their strong tannins. For example, in Tuscany, you would struggle to drink these wines without food. And they can also deliver with wine pairing at certain levels. And so I think Central Otago is relatively new, very different for Pinot Noir, racy acidity, herbaceous, caramel, quite peculiar. In a blind tasting, if you don't go into bottles which are different from the style, you would pick up New Zealand in general and Pinot Noir specifically. So really, really an interesting region. And if you haven't found it or tried yet, you should. Okay, so we are far away from the conflict. South Island, Central Otago, beautiful Pinot Noir, recent discovery, creme brulee, herbaceous, something to try and to put on your map, okay?
Yes.
Now,
it's on my list. I mean, New Zealand is on my list because living in Singapore, definitely it's part of Australia and New Zealand are
you get a
on
lot
top
of those
priority
wines.
for my next vacation.
Yeah, okay,
Next
okay.
holiday.
So the new world, especially for us in Europe now today, both is always something to discover that you find not necessarily everywhere. Thank you for this, Bastian. So South Africa and New Zealand, wrap up of the podcast. We want to touch base very quickly on what is going on in the world of financial markets. What has been your impression of the past few days, Bastian? If you have any feeling, where are things going or not? And I will give a small summary.
I think it's for me it looks like we have lost the North Star. I mean we don't know where we are. I mean one day we are +3, the other day you are -5, and then plus 30% on the oil, and then -20. It's just like I think it's very confusing. Everyone is confused, and we don't know how long this war will last. Now I think it's completely unclear, and we are. I think people, at least on my side, I would be more on a wait and see, side, because it's very confusing. I have to say.
Of course, of course. So the situation is dramatic. Of course, humanitarian situation in the Middle East is terrible. Many people suffering, and we are discussing here about wines, but with a lot of respect, it's just a parenthesis to come out from the reality, which is terrible there. The point to be made here on financial markets is that markets are suffering. So stock market indices have been tanking for a while. Excluding a couple of days where they tried to recover on better news or apparent news of an exit coming soon, which seems not to be the reality of things. Stocks went down because of geopolitical tensions, but especially oil prices and gas prices going up. Important to understand that despite the development of solar systems and wind and AI, a lot of energy depends on gas for industrial production and heating, and oil, industrial production and transportation. So if oil prices go up, it translates almost immediately to the pump where we put gasoline in our cars, or jet fuel or transportation, into rising costs. When you produce as a company, this is a rising cost input for you. So either you produce less, or it will cost more to produce, and you need to translate this into the margins to consumers. So the risk the financial markets perceive is that the more prices go up, the more manufacturing output will cost, and consumers will have to pay the price. At some point, demand will be destroyed. So companies will sell less. Markets anticipate this, so stock markets have been going down first. Second, the problem of this environment is that when stock markets go down, investors protect themselves, if they can, into fixed income, into government bonds. Okay? Typically, if the economy doesn't do well, central banks intervene, cutting interest rates, Fixed income or bonds depend, or they have an yield, an equivalent proxy to an interest rate, which is paid out to investors, and their price, when interest rates go down, tend to go up. So fixed income is usually a good protection in these environments, but not when you have inflation. Because when inflation or expected inflation, so rising prices, which will generate from rising oil prices, make impossible for central banks to cut interest rates because they need to tame inflation, which we have seen in 2022. So here the risk is that not only central banks in Europe, US, and elsewhere will not be able to cut, they will probably have to hike if this continues. So stocks go down, and fixed income bond prices are going down as well. So there is nowhere to hide. Our bet with Pantaray and Pantaray that is to have an all-weather investment strategy that is capable to attack or protect when markets go down. And this is an incredibly difficult context. To give you some numbers, and this is to the 13th of March, European indices year-to-date down by around 4 to 5% depending on the market. US markets similarly down by 3 to 5% year-to-date. We have disclaimers, and please, this is not financial advice, is just to mention we are positive year-to-date because we have tried with our AI to move to the only spaces that work in financial markets, which have been commodities. Not even gold is working, it should, but it has become a speculative asset, so it's not protecting, it's only the energy commodities, where in fact our AI has tried to go early because it's been the only defense. So the situation in Iran and Middle East, dramatic. Financial markets, no compass. Ideally, everything is coming down because of the specter of stagflation, higher inflation with no growth. Nothing is helping in financial markets, if not the energy complex in commodities. So really a difficult environment, similar to last week, deteriorating, the wait and see for an investor not knowing what to buy, or if thinking about buying the dip, wait for longer because the situation can carry on and continue to be problematic. Okay, this would be the quick overview on this week. I would say that with this, thank you for following us, right? We are already at the episode number 20. Thank you for the aficionados to the podcast. It has been a pleasure. Follow us. We have a newsletter, pantaray.substack.com. We have a new website, pantar.ai. You can click on Cartesio CIO link and jump into our platform to see what happens on the markets. In these days, we are changing a couple of things. We'll put the new version online this weekend. Anything else, Bastian, that I forgot? Or anything else to add?
No, just follow us, watch us, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify, and like us, comment, and of course on LinkedIn as well, pantar.ai, and Nico and I, we both obviously have pages, individual pages you can follow and exchange with us.
Yes. Thank you then. See you next
Have
time.
a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.